All right, good afternoon to everyone. It's wonderful to see you. My name is Mike Clifford. I'm the strategy director for Reverse the Red. And so we're going to do a little bit of talking, and we've got good time here to ask questions. One of the things I'm really excited about this conversation and all of you is to take a high impact, measurable outcome lens to a lot of the work that we're going to talk about. So how do we know exactly what we're trying to achieve, and we can deliver the actions and deliver the outcomes that we're after? So without getting too much further, Barney, would you like to introduce yourself anymore?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Barney Long. I'm Senior Director of Conservation Strategies at a conservation organization called Rewild, which is based here in Texas, in Austin.
Fantastic. And so a little bit for us, so Reverse the Red, I've been asked a couple times this morning. It has nothing to do with red and blue politics or with communism, just so we can get that out there. If anybody's been to a zoo or a botanic garden and you see a sign next to the species that says critically endangered or endangered, vulnerable, that is called the IUCN Red List. So that is a scientifically proven measure of threat of extinction. So we are named Reverse the Red with the idea to change the trends of that red list. So that's the context. And our coalition extends pretty much all around the world. We've got partners in 170 countries. And our goal is that no endangered species go extinct and that we see measurable change in a positive direction for threatened species. So that said, what we wanted to talk about a little bit was this plan that we have in place. What we've been doing, and to give a little bit of context, and Barney, maybe I'll ask you to share a bit about this, is there is, through the United Nations and through the Convention on Biological Diversity, an agreement called the Global Biodiversity Framework. Could you share a little bit more about kind of what is that, why does that matter to this conversation?
Sure. I think it's really important because this is 196 countries have signed up to this, and it is the blueprint for saving the world's biodiversity. And whilst biodiversity might not sound that important, biodiversity is effectively the sum part of all of the species on the planet. And species might seem even more removed from what your day-to-day life is. But species are the building blocks of our ecosystems that provide the carbon sequestration, the fresh water, and all of these other environmental services. If you start removing species through extinction one by one, you're effectively removing the ecosystems of a functioning planet. And so whilst people often talk about ecosystem services and these big global issues, it's fundamentally made up of 8 million individual species. And so we need to go down to that lowest common denominator, which is that individual species. So within this global biodiversity framework, there are 4 goals which have been set by the conference, all of the parties to this conference. And the first one of those goals, Goal A, focuses on biodiversity and protecting biodiversity and preventing its decline and actually promoting its restoration so that these ecosystem services, of which 60% of the global GDP depend on, within that Goal A, there are a series of targets, and the first 7 targets really focus on delivering Goal A. We're here today to really focus on one of those targets, which is Target 4, and this is about the protection of the species. As I say, these species are the building blocks of functioning ecosystems, which we all depend on, and they are not counted on our balance sheets, but they are the assets that underpin all of the GDP, or 60+% of GDP of the world.
And we have, so speaking of Target 4, so essentially, I don't know if anybody interacts with some of these UN conventions. One of the challenges is that even though all the countries have agreed to this, countries themselves rarely have the resources, skills, expertise to actually deliver that. So we know that it needs to be a balance of civil society and government working together in order to deliver on these targets. And maybe some of you are like me. I'm slightly competitive. I was a footballer. I think you were a footballer as well, yeah?
Cricket and football.
Of course, okay. So, you don't start the game if you don't intend to win. It's just kind of my plan. It's something that always frustrates me that we set these global targets, but there's not always the intention to win or to deliver the target. And so what we've set out to do with Target 4 is to say, by 2030, we can actually deliver this. This is an achievable goal, and we know the players and we know the pieces and parts to put in place. So essentially what we've done, and why I think this is relevant to this meeting here, is we have these projects actively going in a number of countries, but we have specific groups working on this in Texas and in Mexico and also Canada. Colombia is actually one of our lead pilot countries. So the Colombian government, Humboldt Institute, a number of civil society groups, along with 7 other countries, helped to develop this method. So essentially, again, breaking it really simply is, for Target 4, which species need the most action, the most urgently, as in are likely to go extinct if we don't do something about it. So which species need it? Then we look at how many actions are currently in place for those species, and then that gives us a gap analysis. So I'll use Nigeria as another example. Their list is 118 species. And they have about 30% of those species with actions already in place. So they've got a 70% gap to hit that by the year 2030. That may sound like a lot, but even at EarthX, we're hearing about all these, I just was in a session about water restoration projects, and they said that the estimated cost for the next 3 years would be $173 billion to fix that one problem. We could probably save a whole lot of species for $173 billion. We had one of our partners in Indonesia, 8 of their top 10 species are orchids, small little flowers, where for probably 10 or just a few tens of thousands of dollars, we can actually see a measured change and saving those species to deliver on Target 4. And again, to what Barney was saying, why this matters is species make up the building block of biodiversity. And if we want to see biodiversity restored, it's actually the species that do it. Even if we clear space, we still have to have diversity of species populating those areas. And so the groups that we're talking about, these plants and animals and fungi, are at a point where we can do very targeted actions and actually deliver on global biodiversity targets. So maybe kind of leaning in a little bit and asking you another question here. Their species tends to kind of not get as much attention in some of these big global forums. Could you share maybe a little bit as to why do you think that is, and why are species actually such a hopeful part of biodiversity efforts?
I think when we think about species, probably just take Mexico as an example, probably most people in this room thinking about species in Mexico are probably thinking jaguars, vaquita, maybe tapirs. They're all really, really important species. Obviously, every species is important and has the right to exist on this planet. But those, well, vaquita aside, tapirs and jaguars are found across multiple countries. Have large distributions and are threatened. But Mexico, for example, probably has maybe 1/6 or 1/10 of the populations in the world. And so they have a responsibility to support these species. But the Target 4 list is not going to be those species. It's going to be species that are highly endemic, which means they're only found in a very small area. And probably species you've never even heard of. Small kangaroo rats or frogs that are found on a mountain peak. So when you look at these species on the list of Target 4 for a place like Mexico, you're going to be seeing a lot of species you've never heard of, but which Mexico is 100% responsible for their conservation and for their recovery. And that means that they should actually be the flagship species. It shouldn't be the jaguars. It shouldn't be the tapirs. It should be these small little species that are only found outside of a single village or in an aquifer under one city. And so these are really the species that Mexico should have the real deep pride in, because these are the species that represent the ecosystems, the culture of that country. And that's where I think there's a lot of hope. We've seen over the last few decades where communities build up a sense of pride in a species because they understand that they solely, as a community, globally, are responsible for the survival of a species. These species can become fantastic flagships and really build up that sense of pride and ownership within communities. And if we can do that for these entire lists at the national level, and get governments really excited about these species, get civil society really engaged, and hopefully also get industry and businesses engaged. When you start thinking about social corporate responsibility, what more responsibility is there to look after the biodiversity and those endemic species to the country in which you're operating?
Yeah, and I think piggybacking off of that, had conversations with a lot of corporations and organizations where the care and the desire to contribute to biodiversity is there, right? We know that. That's probably why we're all here in this room. Is how do we work smarter, make sure that we're trying to contribute positively. And one of these areas is we often invest large amounts of dollars in either peer investment or in philanthropic capital to things that are really hard to measure and hard to know that we've made a difference. But what we're seeing is that, again, with species, we have the partners that know how to do the work. We know how to restore species. The actions are there. There's actually very few things we probably need to learn from scratch. We know a lot, but it's a matter of putting those resources in a targeted way. And I'll give you an example, hopefully of interest here. So this was a story actually out of Nigeria. So we did a project called the Accelerator Award where we asked conservationists, we said, what we want from you is to give us your best strategy for 12 months of how to accelerate towards measurable recovery of your species, right? It has to be an endangered or critically endangered species. And so we offered $15,000 US and global premise and global attention. And we also partnered with National Geographic, so the winners would become National Geographic explorers and all that. And $15,000 is not a lot of money. We recognize that. But in one instance, one of the winners, they were able to create a program where they planted and propagated 20,000 critically endangered species of trees out of Nigeria. They worked with 5 local school groups and actually are currently, it's happening now, replanting the forest and bringing back this otherwise endangered species for $15,000. It's this massive, very measurable change for these species. So when we think about kind of where do we invest, how do we do it responsibly and with that tangible outcome, these types of target 4 species is absolutely one of the best places that we can do that. And again, we know scientifically that as we help these species, we get to a point where they are able to start to not only restore themselves, but work to restore entire ecosystems. Working, this is something, Barney, you say often, is working one species at a time only gets us so far. And we have to start to think about scaling. And I don't know if you have any comments about, increasing the scale and pace of the work that we do, but.
Yeah, you should never get me talking about scaling the impact of conservation. But I fully agree. Like, working on a species and then trying to save the next species and then the next species is too slow to save our planet. We need to understand how we can move hundreds or thousands of species at once. How do we start restoring entire communities of species? And that's where we start thinking about how those scaling mechanisms. And those scaling mechanisms are either going to be at the taxonomic level, so trying to figure out how you save all amphibians, or at the geographic kind of socio-political level, such as a country or a state like Texas. And if you can build support for a suite of species within a socio-political system, as Mike said, it's not hugely expensive in the grand scheme of things, and you can really start not just moving a single species, but a group of species. And you can demonstrably show that success through a new method that we've created to monitor the status of a species and its recovery. And that's where we really start getting to scale, but it's also where we really start to me, it gets really exciting because that's when you can really start restoring the natural capital and the natural wonder of a country.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's some things that are in the works as far as bringing together resources from family offices, from corporations, kind of aligning those resources around this very targeted effort. Is there anything you can say as this is all kind of in development?
Yes, I can't mention names, but we are bringing together a coalition of donors in support of species recovery, focused around supporting countries to deliver their target for commitments. So sometime in the next few months that will be announced. And so we're trying to align as many philanthropists and corporate supporters around this ambition, which really is to save the world's 27,000 critically endangered and endangered species.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So if that's something of interest, please do come and find Barney after and chat about that. There's a lot of opportunity and potential here, and we can share more kind of in a side discussion. But I think we've got a little bit of time for questions and would love to, again, maybe hear some of your thoughts from the perspective that you have around species and biodiversity recovery. But maybe the last thought that I'll offer here is all of this work around climate resiliency, around sustainability, how we move the world in a positive direction is a huge task, and it's a very daunting one. And I think as humans, we also need success stories, and we need positive moments of hope. I think it's even why in sports, why we love teams that win, and we kind of hate the teams that can't put the ball in the goal. But we need that to keep us motivated and hopeful. And in the species space and the biodiversity space is absolutely one of the most important places that we can invest, because one, we know what success looks like. We can deliver it relatively quickly and affordably. And for all of your customers, your constituency, for people, in general, our planet and the humans that live here feel a connection to trees, to animals, to birds. They see that in a way that's really difficult to grasp with solar energy or underwater, infrastructure. Those things are important, but it's kind of difficult to get the passion wrapped around it. So when you're looking for votes, or you're looking for your customer base to believe in and support what your organizations are doing, being able to show that real clear outcome of how you contributed and you took responsibility, like Barney, what you're saying, for this species that only lives here. We're the only ones responsible for it. And even Roberto was talking earlier, I don't know if he mentioned a lot of the work that he does with bats, but there's so many endemic species of bats all across Latin America that only live in these little pockets. No one's gonna help them but us, right? The ones who live in that exact space. So we can do it in a very measurable and clear, kind of outcome-driven way. So I think we'll see if there's some questions. If you don't have any for us, I have some for you. So, but maybe we can see if there's some microphones around and take any questions we have at first.
There's one over there.
There's one there. He'll be there just in one moment.
Where is the question? Okay.
Hi. So where we live, there was this park who they grow, and where they are on the shore, on the reef, we used to have a lot of turtles and a lot of North shark. When they came with the racing boats and everything, we lost most of the turtles and all the North shark. This same park, inside, they have North sharks, and they make it to reproduce the North shark there. So they are nice people. They make bad things, but they do a lot of good things too. So because I'm involved with the shark protection, I cut a deal with them, handshake. Mm-hmm. When I guarantee that the reef is going to be safe for all sharks, will you reintroduce sharks in the reef? And the guy shook hand, yes, of course. So I'm telling you this because I haven't guaranteed yet that the sharks are going to be safe. what do you need? What conditions do you need to run your program and put back this species into Mexico, Africa, wherever you want to do it? Thank you.
Great question. Do you have any immediate thoughts?
Well, I'm happy to say that. I'm actually on the governing board of an organization called ReShark, which is doing exactly what you're talking about, which is taking captive bred sharks from aquaria all over the world and reintroducing those sharks into key sites. Now, at the moment, those sites are in Indonesia and Thailand. We're looking to establish new sites in Korea, Japan, the Middle East, East Africa. But the conditions that we need to release are first safe sites. So obviously these sites have lost their sharks because there has been a threat. Sharks have been removed for some reason, either intentionally because of the trade in meat or fins or oil, whatever it is, or as incidental bycatch because of artisanal fishing and sharks get caught in nets, whether you're interested in catching the shark or not. So the first thing is to remove that threat, because you can't put sharks back if they're just going to be killed again. But sharks are really important for two reasons. One is that they are nutrient cyclers. So they take nutrients from the deep ocean and bring them onto coral reefs. So they're actually a fertilizer mechanism for corals. Healthy populations of shark means healthy populations of reef fish, and therefore that in turn drives the second benefit, which is the tourist industry or artisanal fishing industries are much stronger when there's sharks because there are more fish. You would think more sharks, less fish, but actually it's the other way around. More sharks, more fish. So first you need to figure out with the local communities and the industrial fishers how to remove those threats so that sharks can be safe again. Once you've done that, sometimes the sharks will come back naturally, but it's very, very slow because sharks are long-lived and they reproduce very slowly. So what ReShark is doing is working with aquaria who are breeding sharks. Sharks produce egg sacs generally. So the aquaria are producing those egg sacs. And then if you're working with multiple aquaria, those egg sacs from all the different aquaria can be shipped to your site, and they're hatched in wild enclosures, but fenced enclosures, whilst the babies, the pups, grow to a level, a size where they are safe. Then you can release them. And so they've been what we call head started. So they're large enough that they won't get predated on themselves. So this is something that's quite new. It's only been going for a few years. But we've now released over 100 individual animals, primarily in Raja Ampat in Indonesia. But it is definitely possible to do in other sites. So I'd be happy to talk more about that.
Great. Another question in the back there. Sorry, I'm making you run.
Sorry, so I come from a kind of a different background from I think most people I've met here. I teach elementary school, and something I've noticed over the day is everybody's experiences are amazing, and I feel like that's one of the biggest things that I see is that I can do is try to get kids to care. And that seems to be the general theme today. The Prime Minister of Tonga was talking about trying to get people to care, and it's the experience. And so I came here because our local school takes kids to restore coral reefs in the Bahamas. But what I'm noticing you guys are also talking about is the funding and how much a certain amount of money can make such a huge difference. And so I just had questions. My question is about advice. What advice do you have for how to get kids to actually care and other than maybe the experience, because the experience is so expensive, right? Like we're trying to raise $45,000 to take kids to do this from a community where there's 80% poverty rate. So like, it seems like the biggest thing right now in our world is trying to get the future generations to really not just know about it and care about it, but to really invest their time, invest their education. So thoughts around that. How do you see when we're all long gone, the people that are coming up to replace that?
That's first off, awesome that you're doing that. So thank you. That's very cool. Just a few quick thoughts would be, one, I think thinking about things that are closest to home. So when you're trying to engage, whether it's youth or local neighborhoods, things that are far away, like elephants and lions and tigers, is cool and it's fun, but it's relatively difficult to do that kind of work, just logistically. So if you can connect people with a species that lives in its own, in your own backyard, butterflies, I mean, the monarchs is a fantastic example of so much collaboration across a massive amount of area. But connecting kids with things that they can find in their own backyards. The other thing that's amazing about kids, which I would hope that all of us could actually maybe learn from children in this way, is how to just be relentlessly curious about the natural world. My experience is that it's not hard to get kids to be fascinated at a tiny little bug when you can kind of take them out and see that. I also would be fascinated by a tiny little bug, so at this point of life. But so I think that connection to local things, and then really logistically, I would encourage you to check out an organization called Explore by the Seat of Your Pants. It's a group that literally works with schools and teachers to connect you with these amazing scientists all around the world. So that'd be kind of a really practical thing to maybe lean into. Anything to add?
So maybe just to add on to that, there's also another fantastic group called Rewild Your Campus, which is looking at how schools can become a lot greener. And again, it's the species in your own backyard are probably where everyone gets that initial inspiration. We've been working with San Antonio Zoo in Texas for a few years now on reintroducing Texas horned lizards. And again, it's that local connection. The school kids, actually even the ranchers, love it when they see these animals that they used to love as a kid and they've seen physically disappear from the landscape. Once they come back on the landscape, it brings back those childhood memories of seeing them. So I personally think kids are intrinsically fascinated. The question is, how do we keep that with them as they turn into adults?
Yeah. And for anyone that's working on projects, one of the things that I think is always really important is, are we doing projects that are designed to have a measurable impact? And so looking globally, so many things come down to really three metrics that we look at for species: is the overall population, their range, where they live, and the trend. Are they increasing or decreasing? And so if you're designing a project, even something like a citizen science project using eBird or iNaturalist or any of these tools, having that in mind, that are you engaging activities that are measuring or at least attempting to help one of those three criteria? It's something that, particularly from the business community, different than the science community. In the business community, you generally start an initiative with at least some idea of what you expect out of it. There's some sort of an ROI or how you measure success, progress, and make changes. That's not as common in the scientific world, particularly the academic world. And so it's an area that I think we really need to learn from the business community, is how to do things effectively, efficiently, and learn and pivot, change, adapt. Those are things that are not necessarily in the fabric of the traditional scientific community. So I think we're just about out of time, but Barney, maybe a kind of a closing thought, whatever encouragement you would give. I'm expecting you to say something brilliant because I don't have anything in my mind.
Very unlikely. I think I would just end on a plea that as you're thinking about sustainability and how your institution, whether it's government, corporate, nonprofit, family office, however you're thinking about making an impact on this planet, I would just make this plea that please don't forget the species. It's not all about carbon. It's not all about tree cover. All of these things, the world is made up of 8 million plus individual species that is making this planet tick. And we should always go back to that lowest common denominator. And it's also the thing that inspires us more than anything. We all love watching David Attenborough films or Discovery Channel or whatever. That's where the passion comes from. And we want to see those species restored and thriving on this planet. And we should all go back to being our little kids again and loving those bugs or the butterflies and just enjoying the wonder of our planet.
It's fantastic. Yeah, and I'll just give you the invitation, find either of us, particularly this program and this strategy that's getting put in place right now for Mexico, for many of the Latin American countries, for Texas. If you are interested in being a part of that or just learning more, come and find us. These are programs that they're in development and in launch at different stages now with the intent to actually deliver successful measurable outcomes before 2030. So if you want to be a part of that or want to know more, please come and find us. But I think with that, thank you for your time and attention, and we really appreciate all of your commitments to our Earth. So thank you.
Thank you.